Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's podcast, we'll be talking about Chapter 9 of the Odyssey. I'm sure you guys know the drill by now, so please remember to share, like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember to catch up before continuing on. Alright, you guys ready? So, Chapter 9 begins with Odysseus telling the king that it has been lovely to hear the bard sing, that there is nothing better to see than people coming together to eat and drink and listen to music. Since the king asked very graciously, he will tell him the whole story. He doesn't know how to begin or end his tale. So he starts by telling them that he is Odysseus, son of Laertes. That way, if they find their way to his home, he can take care of them. He then tells them he is from Ithaca, and he describes it to them in great detail. He then tells them how the goddess Calypso and Circe tried to keep him hostage. He stops himself and says he'll start from his return from Troy. He tells them that he and his men set sail from Troy, and their first stop was an island called Ismarus, which held the Siconian people. He sacked their city, and he and his men divided the treasures up evenly. He wanted to leave, but his crew wouldn't listen. The next morning, the people had come together in large numbers and attacked Odysseus and his crew. They then left as soon as they could. As they were sailing towards home, Zeus sent a great hurricane their way. They took the sails down for fear of damage. They rowed for 2 days in the direction of land against the wind. On the third day, they put the mast back up and sailed. They should have been home, but they ended up at Cytherea. They continued sailing for 9 days, led by the wind. On the 10th day, they arrived at the land of the Lotus Eaters. When they made it onto shore, he sent 3 of his men to investigate and talk to the people of the land. The people didn't hurt Odysseus's men, but instead gave them flowers to eat. The men instantly forgot about going home and wanted nothing more than to stay and eat the flowers. Odysseus had grabbed his men, put them on ship, and made them fast to get the flower out of their system. He got all of his men back on the ships, and they set out to sea. The next place they ended up was at the land of the Cyclopses. Odysseus tells the people how these creatures are pure monsters, and that they are so uncivilized. Not far away from the Cyclops is a small island. Odysseus tells everyone that it is beautiful and that it would be a dream to any man who sailed there. Lots of farming, clear water springs, lots of animals, etc. He said that the reason it is uninhabited is because the Cyclops, they don't know how to sail or make boats. Odysseus tells everyone that they sailed towards this island. However, it became so thick with clouds that they couldn't see where to go. Luckily, they made it to the shore and camped out on the beach until morning. In the morning, him and his men got up and started hunting the goats. They killed many goats and feasted and feasted. They still had plenty of wine left over from the jars that they had when they sacked the city of Sicony. On the other island of the Cyclops, Odysseus and his men could see their fires and almost hear their voices. That night they camped on the beach, and in the next morning Odysseus calls a council. He tells his men that he's going to go over to the Cyclops' island and see if they truly are monsters. He tells his men to stay at the good island and that he'll only take his boat over there. He gets his boat and goes over to the island. When he and his crew got there, they saw a cave decorated with laurels. There were many sheep and goats in the front yard of the cave. The Cyclops that lived there wasn't home. Odysseus tells his men to stay on the boat, except the 12 best. They were to go with him, and he also took some wine and some provisions for himself and his men. They make it to the cave, but the Cyclops was still out shepherding. They go inside his cave and saw all that the Cyclops had. He had a huge assortment of homemade cheeses and a large supply of goats and lambs. The men begged Odysseus to let them take these wonderful things back to the boat, but Odysseus would not let them. He wanted to wait for the Cyclops to return in hopes that he may give them a gift. They lit a fire and offered some of the cheeses to the gods, and then ate the rest. They waited for him to return. When he did, he threw his dry wood that he had been collecting on the ground, and this scared Odysseus and his men, so they hid. He then rolled a giant smooth stone over the entrance to his cave. Next, he milked the goats and sheep. He set half of the milk out to start the cheese-making process, and the other half he saved for his dinner. He then spoke to the strangers. He asked who they were and where they came from. Also, if they be friend or foe. Odysseus answers the Cyclops and tells him that they are Achaeans, who helped sack the city of Troy, so they're Agamemnon's men. He asks the Cyclops to show mercy and hospitality to them, for they are foreigners in distress, and that he should fear the wrath of Zeus if he doesn't help them. The Cyclops then tells Odysseus that he is a fool, and the Cyclops don't care about Zeus or any other gods. He also said that he will spare Odysseus and his men only if he feels like it. He then asks Odysseus where their boats are located. Odysseus does not fall for this trap and says that Poseidon drove his ships to the rocks and that he and his men who escaped are with him. The monster does not respond, but instead grabs two of Odysseus's men and smashes them on the ground, killing them. He then proceeds to eat them, bones, flesh, and all. He then drinks milk to wash it down with. After this, he sleeps with his sheep close to him. Odysseus wants nothing more than to kill him, but if he does, then there will be no way of escaping the cave. The next morning, the Cyclops wakes up and eats two more of Odysseus's men. He milked his animals, and he rolled the stone away from the entrance of the cave. He let the sheep out, and then rolled the stone back. Odysseus came up with a plan for revenge. While the Cyclops was out shepherding, Odysseus and his men made a spear with some of the wood that they could find around the cave. They then put it into the fire to harden it. Odysseus tells the men that once the Cyclops is asleep, they will spear him in the eye. The Cyclops returns and brings his animals in the cave to milk. He finishes milking them and then eats two more of Odysseus's men. Odysseus gets really pissed and decides to speed up his plan. He brings the Cyclops some wine in a nice bowl. Odysseus tells the Cyclops that he should have some wine since he was feasting upon flesh. He says that he was coming to make a drink offering to him in hopes that he would help him get home. Odysseus tells the Cyclops that he ought to be nice or else no one would ever come to visit him. The Cyclops asks for more wine and asks Odysseus to tell him his name. The Cyclops wants to make him a present. The Cyclops then compliments the wine. After 3 bowls of wine, Odysseus tells the Cyclops that his name is No Man. The Cyclops then tells No Man that the present he will give him is that he will eat all of No Man's men first and save No Man for last. The Cyclops then gets really sick and throws up the wine and bits of human flesh. The Cyclops then falls asleep. Odysseus and his men took the spear and put it into the fire until it was glowing hot red. They then stabbed the monster in the eye with the spear. Odysseus describes this in great detail, and even recalls the sound it makes, like that of glowing iron into water. The Cyclops then wakes up and starts to scream. The other Cyclops hear him and rush to the outside of his cave. They ask him what's going on. He tells them that no man is killing him by fraud, and that no man is killing him by force. So the other Cyclopses think he's going crazy, and leaves him alone in his cave. They tell him that he ought to pray to Zeus or Poseidon to be cured. Polyphemus, the Cyclops that all this is happening to, and he's the son of Poseidon, then opens the entrance to the cave and stretches his arms across the opening, in hopes of catching them. Odysseus laughs to himself that his plan actually worked. Now he starts to think of his next plan to escape. He tells his men to find the male sheep and to hide under them, not on top of them. They waited until the morning and then did what they were told to do. Odysseus took the best male sheep for himself. The Cyclops then wakes up and rolls the stone away. The sheep all went out of the cave, and he checked the backs of all of them with his hands to see if he could find the men. The Cyclops stops the one sheep that Odysseus is under, because that's his favorite, and talks to him. He tells the sheep that usually he's the first one out in the morning and the first one back at night. He asks the sheep if everything is okay, and if he knows that the awful No Man has blinded him, and that maybe the sheep was trying to comfort him. He says that surely if the sheep could talk, he could tell him exactly where those awful men were at. The Cyclops then shoos the sheep away. Odysseus and the men who are left escape. They freed themselves and brought the sheep back to the boat. When the crew that were on the boats see the men returning, they get very excited and happy, but then start to cry for the men who they had lost. Odysseus quiets them and they set sail. Once they were a little ways out, Odysseus begins to taunt the Cyclopses. The Cyclops hears him and throws a massive boulder at their boat, and it sends the boat back to the shore, and he tells his men to row with everything they have. When they got out double the distance, he started to taunt them again, but his men tell him to shut up. He doesn't listen to them, and then tells the Cyclops that he can tell everyone that Odysseus is the one who blinded him. The Cyclops then tells Odysseus that the prophecy is coming true. He then invites Odysseus into his home for presents. Odysseus wishes that he could just kill the Cyclops himself. The Cyclops then prays to his dad and asks him to kill Odysseus. If not kill him, then to kill all of his men and make Odysseus' trip long and difficult for him. Poseidon hears this prayer, and the Cyclops throws another boulder their way. Odysseus and his men make it to the good island where his other ships were, and they split up the sheep. They then made sacrifices to Zeus. They then eat and drink until nighttime, and they slept on the shore and camped out until morning. In the morning, they packed up and set sail. Guys, this is the end of Chapter 9. I hope that you're enjoying this chapter and are ready for Chapter 10. Thank you for listening, and we hope you like, share, comment, and subscribe. And as always, stay lit.